And last but not least, we have a writer who I have shared table of contents with. I do want to go to my like in the beginning, but no, I'd be lying if I said that we did in the beginning of our careers. But I have been following her career very closely and will continue to do so. She's been doing some wonderful things that I hope all of you will follow as well. So let me give the formal introduction. C.O. Davidson work has appeared in Pseudopod, Bastarian, Cemetery Gates, and in various horror anthologies. She co-edited Monsters of Film, Fiction, and Fable, and is a founding member of the Atlanta chapter of the Horror Writers Association. She teaches writing the Gothic and horror at Middle Georgia State University and lives with her husband, Andy, and their 11, yes, count them, 11 cats. That is quite a lot. And I will put her Substack link in the chat as she reads. Crystal, go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Thank you for that introduction, Elaine. Yes, and my story seems to have more cat than bird, at least in the excerpt that I'm going to read for y'all tonight. Inspired by the quote from Thoreau, I rejoice that there are owls. This story about an academic couple who bought a house in the country, the husband's dream, but quickly he loses interest. And soon he's spending more evenings back on campus, sometimes with a certain French teacher, rather than living his authentic Thoreau-inspired life with his wife, Lainey, who discovers her own secret authenticity, rejoicing in the power of a mysterious feathered entity in the woods. This is an excerpt from my story, A Parliament in the Woods, days after Chuck and Lainey have moved into their new house in the country. Jesus Christ! Oh, Jesus! Lainey ran into the sunroom. What is it? Chuck stood at the open storm door, staring down in dismay. Shoulders shaking, he pointed down at the mat, and Lainey looked. There, a dead rabbit, just the head, a green bottle fly perched at the edge of a blue eye, staring up at Chuck and Lainey. Just off the mat, a neat pile of guts, black ants already trailing ribbon up the stairs toward it. Oh, I'm so sorry, Lainey said. I guess we can bury this in the field? Chuck backed away, palms up. I'm not touching that, he said, and retreated into the den. Lainey sighed and retrieved the shovel from the shed, scooped up the remains, and brought them into the field, digging a hole and burying them. She hosed off the porch. She knew this had been the work of the cat. Last Tuesday, Chuck was at the university teaching one of his evening classes, and Lainey had been sitting on the back porch, serenaded by pond frogs while she drank wine. Into her third glass, a large striped tabby came slinking out of the meadow, up the back steps, and flopped at her feet. He looked up at Lainey. He had a snaggletooth that pulled his upper lip into a rakish sneer. Delighted, she called him a big, pretty boy, and he answered with a purr, like an old outboard motor turning over. He then shifted to an angle that allowed him to lick his prodigious balls. That evening, Lainey fed him leftover chicken strips, but the next day she bought a bag of kibble and cans of cat food, all now stored in the back of the pantry. Then came almost daily gifts, dead robins, baby mice, that so far Lainey had managed to hide from Chuck, except for the rabbit incident, which she blamed on a fox. Her husband knew nothing of foxes apart from his one encounter, and less about cats, only that he was an opponent of those who fed the stray cat population on campus. An invasive species, he'd tell people like the biologist who cared about such things. Lainey had bought a carrier that she stashed behind unpacked moving boxes in a deep hall closet and planned to coax the cat into the box and take him to the vet for shots and to permanently fix those balls. But the vet wasn't open in the evenings when Chuck was on campus, and the cat would creep out of the meadow and up the porch steps. It didn't matter that Lainey met the cat with a food bowl already down. He would always wind around her legs and then lean in for pets before he ate. Afterwards, he'd curl up at her feet or sit at the top of the steps, staring into the woods, staying for hours. Only when Chuck's car finally pulled into the drive, the cat would slink down the steps and into the meadow, vanishing into the tree line, just as Chuck walked up those steps. Chuck would grin, and Lainey would often smell beer, sometimes a whiff of perfume. Not hers. She wondered if it were French. Several years ago, Lainey had seen a PBS documentary on Thoreau. While the writer was living in the woods, an experiment away from society that he'd later record in Walden, the cabin he built was actually only a few miles from town, where he'd often visit his aunt around dinner time. According to his Concord neighbors, once, while Thoreau was cooking fish on the perimeter of the woods, a spark jumped from his fire, starting a blaze that blighted a swath of the woods for decades. Lainey thought about that documentary while putting the wire around Chuck's vegetable garden to keep the deer from eating the rest. While walking to the mailbox or loading garbage cans into Chuck's shiny truck to take the trash to a dump a county away, she noticed a few cars slowing down as they drove by the house. Then she saw what they did, the weedy beds and tall grass. "I'm wilding the entire yard, even the front. People just can't appreciate the natural world," Chuck said. But Lainey became conscious of those cars, likely from town, and what they now thought about these people who bought this old house, one with some history here. She began weeding the front beds and eventually mowing the lawn, no longer annoyed that Chuck had spent so much on a zero-turn riding mower, one that he had ridden only once to cut a partial trail into the underbrush of the woods. Lainey, not Chuck, began walking that trail and soon beyond it, every day pushing farther into the woods before turning back, plucking through the understory, climbing over logs, the cat, now Rupert, following. And I'll stop there.